On May 2, 2011, the world was shaken as major newspapers simultaneously reported that Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, had been killed. People believed that his death would mark the end of a dark era of global terrorism. But history does not close so easily. From the ashes of al-Qaeda, Osama's ideological successor, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, founded IS, the self-proclaimed Islamic State, rising with the ambition of building a global caliphate. IS quickly expanded its territory, spreading fear across the Middle East and terrifying the world. The following years saw a brutal war between international coalitions and terrorist forces. One by one, its strongholds fell, its leaders were eliminated, until the organization was completely wiped out. Yet the question still echoes, is this truly the end of terrorism, or merely the silence before another storm begins? When the last cannons of the 2003 Iraq War fell silent, the entire Middle East was left with nothing but smoke, ruins, and an overwhelming emptiness. In that power vacuum, an extremist ideology began to take shape, and just over a decade later, it would grow into one of the most terrifying nightmares of the modern world. Today, let us travel back in time to uncover the story of one of the most infamous organizations of the 21st century, the Islamic State, IS. From its birth and rise fueled by dark ambitions to its eventual downfall and destruction. The 2003 Iraq invasion, launched by the United States and its international coalition under the pretext of searching for weapons of mass destruction, ended with the collapse of Saddam Hussein's regime. But that victory marked the beginning of a new era of chaos. The central government of Iraq quickly crumbled, the army disbanded, and the Sunni and Shia Muslim tribes, who had been at odds for centuries, began to settle their old scores. The legal system, education, and economy were nearly paralyzed. Meanwhile, thousands of extremist fighters who had been imprisoned under Saddam's rule were released. Many of them had once been members of radical Islamic groups dating back to the Afghan War. A nation collapsed, a society out of control, and within that void, the seeds of extremism were sown. In the small city of Zarqa, Jordan, in 1966, a child was born into a poor family. His name was Ahmad Fadil al-Kalaileh, the man the world would later know as Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Zarqawi dropped out of school early, wandered the streets, and fell into gambling, alcohol, and drugs. No one could have imagined that this uneducated young man would one day become one of the most notorious terrorists in the world. After being arrested for fighting, Zarqawi was sent by his mother to a local mosque, hoping her son would change. There, he met clerics with extremist views, men who believed that the Islamic world had been humiliated by the West. Zarqawi began studying the Quran and gradually came to believe that violence is the only way to defend the faith. In 1989, when the Soviet Union withdrew its troops from Afghanistan, thousands of young Muslims from around the world flocked there to join the holy war. Zarqawi was among them. On the Afghan battlefield, he learned how to handle weapons, make bombs, and, above all, to believe that sacrificing one's life could turn a man into a martyr of God. It was there that Zarqawi met Osama bin Laden, the founder of al-Qaeda. Both believed that the Islamic world needed to be purified, but they were not the same. Bin Laden wanted to attack the West, while Zarqawi believed it was necessary to exterminate other Muslims, especially the Shia, before confronting external enemies. That small difference in ideology would later cost hundreds of thousands of lives. After returning to Jordan, Zarqawi planned to attack the government, but was arrested in 1994. In prison, he met Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi, an educated man, a skilled speaker, and an extremist Islamic ideologue. Makdisi became Zarqawi's spiritual mentor, helping him transform his blind hatred into an ideology. During 5 years behind bars, Zarqawi not only trained his body, but also persuaded hundreds of other inmates to follow him. These men would later form the core of the terrorist organization he would create. In 1999, King Abdullah II of Jordan ascended the throne and declared a general amnesty. Zarqawi was released, and only a few months later, he left Jordan, heading to Afghanistan, where he believed his mission had only just begun. In Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden had by then built al-Qaeda into a global network. Zarqawi sought to join, but bin Laden did not trust him. A man known for his temper, lack of education, and extreme methods. Zarqawi was assigned a minor position in the north, near the Iranian border. Yet it was that forgotten frontier that became the cradle of a new organization. There, Zarqawi began gathering loyal fighters and forming his own network, the precursor to al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI, the group that would later evolve into the Islamic State, IS. History is often shaped by small turning points. For Zarqawi, that turning point came when al-Qaeda refused to accept him. As the United States prepared to invade Iraq in 2003, Zarqawi was hiding in the country's north, quietly building a secret base and waiting for the right moment. Ironically, it was a speech by U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell at the United Nations that made the name Zarqawi known to the world. Powell declared, "The Iraqi government is sheltering a very dangerous terrorist, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi." That statement became, unintentionally, a free publicity campaign for Zarqawi. In the eyes of extremists, he suddenly turned into a symbol of the jihad against the United States. From then on, hundreds of fighters from across the region flocked to Iraq to join his group. None of them knew that from those small seeds of hatred, only a few years later, an Islamic State would rise in the desert, and the world would face an unprecedented nightmare. And then the invasion of Iraq began, leading to the collapse of Saddam Hussein's regime. Security forces disintegrated, and hundreds of weapons depots were left unguarded. Local militias sprang up like mushrooms, each controlling its own territory. While U.S. troops focused on searching for the so-called weapons of mass destruction, which never existed, Zarqawi quietly recruited and gathered Sunni Muslim fighters who had been pushed to the margins. He called them the betrayed ones, and promised to restore their honor through revenge. Amid the chaos, he saw an opportunity, a chance to turn hatred into power. In October 2004, Zarqawi pledged allegiance to Osama bin Laden. His group formally took the name Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI, but the relationship was never truly solid. Unlike bin Laden, who advocated attacks on the West, Zarqawi regarded Shia Muslims, same religion but different branch, as a more dangerous adversary. He declared, "The enemy is within our house. We must purge before conquering the world." From then on, suicide bombings, attacks on Shia places of worship, and assaults targeting civilians began across Iraq. Zarqawi's strategy was to provoke civil war, to drive Sunnis and Shias to slaughter each other, thereby weakening Iraq's new government. Zarqawi did not fight only with weapons. He also understood the power of imagery. He recorded and distributed extremist propaganda videos showing brutal acts against Western hostages. These images spread rapidly across the internet, becoming symbols of fear in the digital age. In the eyes of the West, Zarqawi was known as the Butcher of Baghdad, but to some extremists he was seen as the defender of the faith. By spreading fear, Zarqawi turned his own image into a weapon. However, Zarqawi's brutality also made him the #1 target of the international community. The people of Iraq, both Sunni and Shia, were horrified by his extremist actions. Even al-Qaeda's central leadership began to voice criticism. In 2005, Osama bin Laden sent a letter urging Zarqawi to show restraint, fearing that his excessive violence would turn Iraqis against them. But Zarqawi ignored the warning. He believed that fear was the most effective tool of control. On June 7, 2006, U.S. intelligence located Zarqawi's hideout in Baquba, northern Iraq. 2 F-16 jets were dispatched. A precision-guided bomb was dropped on the house where he was meeting with his lieutenants. The explosion destroyed the building. Zarqawi was killed along with 5 associates. His death was confirmed just hours later. Around the world, the media hailed it as a major victory in the war on terror. Yet even on the day he died, people knew that. When one extremist falls, many others will rise to take his place. The death of Zarqawi did not erase what he had set in motion. His organization, al-Qaeda in Iraq, suffered heavy losses, but it did not disappear. The survivors withdrew into the shadows, waiting for a new opportunity. Zarqawi was gone, but his legacy was not bodies. It was an ideology, the belief that violence could replace justice. From those ashes, a new generation would rise, more ruthless, more ambitious, and more dangerous than ever before. Among them was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a Sunni religious scholar who had been imprisoned by the United States at Camp Bakr, where thousands of extremists were held. In that prison, the extremists were not reformed. They were connected, trained, and prepared for the next stage. After Zarqawi was killed in 2006, al-Qaeda in Iraq nearly collapsed. Yet the network of fighters and the extremist ideology he left behind continued to exist. The surviving commanders announced the reformation of the group under a new name, the Islamic State of Iraq, ISI. This marked the era of Abu Omar al-Baghdadi, along with his close aide Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a Sunni theologian with a doctorate who once taught at the University of Baghdad. If Zarqawi was the flame of violence, then Baghdadi was the one who learned to forge power from that flame. When U.S. forces established their occupation, they detained thousands of terrorism suspects and imprisoned them at Camp Bakr in southern Iraq. The camp soon became known as a university of extremism. Extremist inmates were held together, organizing prayers, sermons, and recruitment efforts. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, then merely a cleric, used his religious knowledge to gain influence inside the camp. By the time he was released in 2009, he already had a loyal network of commanders, forged and connected within an American-run prison. Camp Bakr, a place meant to contain extremism, inadvertently became the breeding ground for a future terrorist empire. In 2011, the wave of the Arab Spring reached Syria. Protests against the Assad government quickly turned into a civil war. Dozens of armed factions, from moderate to extremist, plunged into the fighting. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi saw a golden opportunity. Syria lacked a strong central government, and all sides were desperate for aid, weapons, and fighters. He sent his forces to support certain rebel groups, both to expand his influence and to recruit new members. By 2013, his organization had changed its name to the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, and began operating independently, no longer taking orders from al-Qaeda's central leadership. Al-Qaeda's leader Ayman al-Zawahiri officially severed ties. From that point on, ISIL stood alone with a bold objective: to establish a caliphate, a unified Islamic state spanning the world. In June 2014, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi made a public appearance at the Al-Nuri Mosque in Mosul. Wearing a black robe and a white turban, he declared himself the Caliph, the successor to the Prophet Muhammad. In his sermon, Baghdadi called on all Muslims around the world to pledge allegiance to him. The group ISIL officially changed its name to the Islamic State, IS. Within just a few months, IS controlled vast territories stretching from Mosul, Iraq to Raqqa, Syria, an area home to over 8 million people. For the first time in the 21st century, the world witnessed a terrorist organization controlling land, collecting taxes, printing money, and governing like a state. Has divided its territory into provinces, wilayat, establishing its own administrative system, Islamic courts, religious police, and taxation structure. It issued gold dinar coins, opened schools teaching extremist doctrines, and operated hospitals and factories. Online, IS published annual reports detailing the number of operations, casualties, and even revenue from oil sales. Everything was presented like a multinational corporation, except that its product was violence and fear. It was not merely an armed group, it was a fully functioning machine, a self-proclaimed state born out of chaos. IS built a sophisticated media apparatus known as the Al-Hayat Media Center. Its videos were produced like cinematic films with dramatic soundtracks and powerful rhetoric. Thousands of young people from Europe, Asia, and Africa were drawn by its message of restoring the Islamic Caliphate. Many left their families and homelands to travel to the Middle East and join the group. As did not only seize territory, it seized the minds of lost youth. As is expanded, the world was shaken. Western powers, Arab nations, and even Iran and Russia, longtime rivals, all came to see IS as a common enemy. An international coalition was formed, launching thousands of airstrikes on IS-held territories. Yet during 2014-2015, IS remained resilient, controlling major cities and carrying out a series of large-scale attacks across Europe. In that moment, the world realized this was no longer just a terrorist group, it was a global phenomenon. How could IS grow to such power? A state cannot survive on violence alone. To maintain control, it needs money, belief, and a governing system. The Islamic State, IS, understood this well and built a network of finance, propaganda, and control so sophisticated that the world was left in shock. After seizing vast territories across Iraq and Syria, IS controlled dozens of oil fields, refineries, banks, and trade routes. Within months, it became the wealthiest terrorist organization in history. Experts estimated that, at its peak in 2015, IS earned over $1 million per day from crude oil smuggling. Oil pumped from wells in Mosul and Raqqa was transported by tanker trucks across the Turkish border, where it conveniently disappeared from official records. Black oil flowed across the border, and in return, blood was spilled across the Middle East. Beyond oil, IS also profited through bank robberies, taxation, antiquities trafficking, and human trade. In Mosul, immediately after taking the city, it seized the assets of the state treasury, more than $400 million in cash. That became the foundation of its vast financial machine. Beyond oil revenues, IS also established a taxation system called zakat, nominally a religious tax. Every household and business, including Muslims themselves, was required to pay taxes to the so-called state. Non-Muslims were forced to pay an additional protection tax. Those who refused or evaded payment faced confiscation of property or public punishment. The revenue was used to buy weapons, pay fighters, and fund the administration. Ironically, within territories under IS control, public order was often more stable than in other war-torn regions. The group collected garbage, ran hospitals, and opened schools, all under the strict enforcement of Sharia law. IS understood that to rule, one must first teach people to live with fear and accept obedience as normal. No terrorist organization had ever possessed a media capability as powerful as IS. They didn't just spread messages, they created an entire virtual world of their own. The Al Hayat Media Center produced videos in multiple languages: Arabic, English, French, Russian, and German. They employed people skilled in film editing, script writing, drone operation, music composition, and cinematic effects. Every propaganda video, every battle song, every image of peaceful life under the caliphate was meticulously staged like a movie. Has also published the online magazines Depict and Rumiyah, blending theology, battlefield reports, and articles glorifying martyrs. On social media, hundreds of fake accounts posing as Westerners were created to spread messages and recruit followers. In the age of social media, bullets are not as dangerous as clicks. Many young people from Europe, the United States, and Southeast Asia, feeling lost and disillusioned with modern society, found in IS what they believed to be a purpose in life. IS propaganda videos portrayed its fighters as heroes, living together as brothers in the desert and fighting for their faith. Young women were promised a pure, unbetrayed love and were called the princesses of the caliphate. Many believed it, leaving their families and flying to Syria, only to discover that what awaited them was slavery and war. At its height, United Nations intelligence estimated that more than 40,000 foreign fighters from over 100 countries had joined IS. They were not bought with money, but with the illusion of salvation. IS understood that every recorded death was a message to the world. Videos showing executions, torture of prisoners, and the destruction of cultural heritage were released not only to spread fear, but also to demonstrate defiance against all authority. Every frame, every news clip served a purpose: to terrify their enemies and to radicalize their followers. They did not seek to be loved, they only wanted to be remembered through fear. By 2015, IS had a budget comparable to that of a small nation. It printed its own currency, controlled trade, and maintained an internal accounting and reporting system. Financial experts described it as a terrorist state operating with international standards, a paradox never seen before. Yet even at its height, it began to undermine itself. Brutality, harsh taxation, and public punishments drove ordinary people to turn away in resentment. Many of its former fighters defected or fled. An empire can be built on money, but it cannot survive without faith. Amid the deserts of the Middle East is once built a kingdom of blood, money, and fear. But every empire born of violence must pay its price. And when the world began to fight back, the so-called Islamic State slowly revealed its true nature, a nightmare that could not last forever. By 2016, after years of dominance in the Middle East, IS was surrounded on all sides. The US-led international coalition, together with the Iraqi army, Kurdish forces, and the Syrian government, launched simultaneous offensives. The once iconic cities, Fallujah, Tikrit, and then Mosul, fell one after another. The Battle of Mosul lasting nearly 9 months, became one of the bloodiest urban battles of the 21st century. The city was left in ruins, and more than 10,000 civilians lost their lives. When the dust settled, the black flag of IS flew no more. A city in ruins, a dream turned to dust. If Mosul was the economic heart, then Raqqa, in Syria, was the political soul of IS. It was here that Baghdadi and his clerics proclaimed laws, administered rule, spread propaganda, and enforced punishments. By late 2017, the US-led international coalition, together with the Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, had encircled Raqqa. Tens of thousands of civilians were trapped between airstrikes and desperate IS fighters. IS resisted fiercely, even using civilians as human shields. In October 2017, Raqqa fell. The image of a soldier removing the black flag from the rooftop of the city center spread across the world, a symbol of the caliphate's collapse. A state built in blood, finally drowned in its own. After the fall of Raqqa, thousands of IS fighters fled into the desert or across the Iraq-Syria borderlands. Many were captured or killed, while others hid among civilians. The women once recruited from Europe began pleading to return home. The children born under IS rule were left stateless and without a future. Refugee camps filled with those who once believed they were living in the paradise of the caliphate. When faith collapses, all that remains is guilt and ruin. After losing nearly all its territory, Baghdadi vanished. For years he was believed to be dead, until he reappeared in several videos, as if to prove that Is was still alive. In October 2019, US intelligence located him in the village of Barisha, in northern Syria. The Delta Force was ordered to strike. Cornered in a dead-end tunnel, Baghdadi detonated a suicide vest, killing himself and 2 of his children. Following the raid, US President Donald Trump declared, "He died like a dog, like a coward." But behind that declaration lay another truth. The death of one man cannot end an idea. In 2019, the United States and the international coalition declared that IS had been completely defeated in terms of territory. However, many smaller branches of the group remained active across the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. In particular, ISK, the Afghan branch, rose to prominence after the Taliban returned to power in 2021. The group carried out numerous deadly attacks, targeting both civilians and the Taliban government. IS was no longer a state, but it remained a dangerous idea. The belief that violence and blind faith could bring justice. For every extremist who falls, another may be born, not for money, but for misguided belief. IS is not just the story of the Middle East. It is a warning to the world, a reminder of how despair, poverty, and division can be exploited to create monsters born of hatred. It also shows that technology, media, and social networks, tools meant to connect humanity, can, if left unchecked, become weapons of hatred more powerful than any gun. Is did not fall because it lost its land, but because, in the end, the world saw the truth. No state built on fear can ever endure. Like every storm, when it passes, it leaves ruins and unanswered questions. Can we prevent another storm from rising if the world remains unjust and divided? After the fall of IS, tens of thousands of women and children were left behind in refugee camps across Syria and Iraq. The Al-Hol camp, located in the Syrian desert, now houses over 60,000 people, most of them wives and children of IS fighters. Among them are thousands of children born during the Caliphate era. They have no nationality, no education, and no future. Many do not know who their fathers were, only that they once called a man with a gun father. These children are not guilty, yet they are growing up among the ashes of guilt. Humanitarian organizations warn that unless the world acts, these very children may become the next generation of extremists. Millions of people who once lived under Heir's rule have yet to return to a normal life. Those who were tortured, assaulted, or witnessed atrocities continue to suffer deep psychological scars that may last a lifetime. In particular, the Yazidi community, a religious minority in Iraq, was branded as heretics by IS and subjected to systematic persecution. Men were executed and women and children enslaved. More than 10 years have passed, yet thousands of Yazidi women remain missing. Some have returned, but cannot reintegrate, as society still looks upon them with silence and stigma. IS is dead, but the pain it caused lives on in the memories of those who survived. After it lost all its territory, many nations declared victory. But that victory was only military. The ideology behind it still endures. Across the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, small groups under the banner of IS affiliates continue to launch sporadic attacks. Online, thousands of anonymous accounts still spread extremist ideology. Researchers warn, IS doesn't need territory. It only needs the faith of one desperate soul. And in a world still plagued by injustice, poverty, and division, the soil remains fertile for extremism to rise again. As long as misery and hatred remain, the shadow of IS has not disappeared. Yet amid the ruins, people still find ways to begin again. In Mosul, residents rebuild schools, hospitals, and mosques. Former enemies, Sunni and Shia, now sit at the same table. In Raqqa, youth groups open free classes for children, teaching skills, reading, and writing. Those who were once victims have become storytellers, ensuring that the world will never forget what happened. They do not seek revenge, they only wish to live an ordinary life. IS once used social media as a weapon, a warning to the world about the power of information and misguided belief. Today, nations have increased efforts to remove extremist content, counter online propaganda, and invest in education, communication, and programs for ideological rehabilitation. An idea cannot be destroyed by bombs, only by knowledge and compassion. The Islamic State was not merely a terrorist organization, but a symbol of an age of extremism and error, an age where hatred overshadowed reason and faith was turned into a weapon of cruelty. Yet history always has two sides. From within that darkness, humanity learned the priceless lessons of freedom, tolerance, and peace. Those who forget the past are doomed to relive it, but those who face it, who remember, can move forward, ensuring the nightmare never returns.